Thank you for tuning in for this week's live Q&A. Today we're up on the balcony and we're going to have a look at this little hive. We're in our winter here. It's been raining for days and it looks like not much is going on. Now normally we wouldn't pull apart this hive on a grey rainy day, but for the purposes of show and tell, we're going to get in here and have a look and see what's going on in the brood box down below. Down here we just have our wood and wax frames. The bees have naturally drawn their comb. This hive started off as a swarm on the mango tree. We dumped it into the box, and while it's filled out this bottom box, it hasn't really gotten on its feet in order to produce or collect enough nectar to store honey in the top box. So let's just have a look first with observations from outside the hive. And if you've got questions, put it in the comments and we'll answer those as we go. Trace will read your questions out, and that way we can help you get going with any questions you've got in beekeeping. So first of all, just looking around the hive and looking at the entrance, what we're seeing is no bees. So that's a bit of a cause for alarm. Looking, no bees coming in means things are pretty quiet in this hive, although it is a great rainy day in winter, so perhaps that's the reason why we don't have any activity here at the entrance. Next, let's have a look in the side windows. So what we've got is no bees there too, so straight away we're thinking this hive is a bit quiet, there's not enough bees in here. What is going on? We better check on it. And to really check on it, we're going to be taking this top box off and pulling out frames from here to have a look what is going on. If you go to the rear observation window, when things are going great, you should see honey stores starting to build up in here. But all we've got is an empty box with a bit of condensation, which is typical when the bees aren't working this box. So you could probably take this box off, give the bees less area to look after if they don't really need it yet. Considering we're in our winter here, there's not a whole lot going on at the moment. However, next month I'm expecting a flow, so I'm just going to leave this box on, because here in the subtropics on the east coast of Australia we get flows during the winter time, especially the late part of winter. And by flow I mean a nectar flow where the flowers are really storing a whole lot of they're really producing a whole lot of nectar. The bees can get that and store it in the hive and produce honey from it. So looking around, it looks like this hive might be in trouble. We don't know. We don't know till we pull it apart. So what we're going to do is what's called a brood inspection. Beginner beekeeping Q&A today. We try to hold a space where you can ask any questions you like, and sometimes out there in bee clubs and things, it's not necessarily a friendly environment to ask really beginner questions. What we like to do here is provide a space where you can ask whatever questions you like, doesn't matter how silly they are, and we'll try and answer those. And also, if you've got answers to people's questions, chime in and help those. We all started off as new beekeepers once, so don't be ashamed to ask those beginner questions. So we're dedicated to beginner beekeeping today, and we're doing a beginner beekeeping brood inspection. So one of the first things you'll be doing is getting yourself protected from bees. So get yourself a good bee suit if you don't have one already, and make sure you are doing it up. And also wear your gloves if you're new to beekeeping. I won't wear them because I'm an experienced beekeeper, but start off wearing your gloves, and over time you can experiment once you've really learned about your bees and the temperament and how they behave and how to listen to the hive for when they're starting to get more agitated. Then you can experiment with taking your gloves off, but have them handy so when the hive does get more agitated when you're doing your brood inspections, you can put those gloves on. And then you've got a hood that goes over the top like this. You've got two zips that cross in the middle, and then a Velcro flap that comes down. Now, while I don't mind a sting or two on my hands, I don't really like them on the face, so I'm prepared to go gloveless, but I do want my veil on because I don't want stings on my face. But if you really want to minimize the chance of any stings, wear your gloves, wear a full suit, make sure it's well sealed up around the ankles as well. Now, the next one is the smoker. You should always use a smoker when you're doing your inspection. It's a great tool and it has a calming effect on the bees. So when the bees start to get a bit agitated, you can blow some more smoke and they'll calm down after a little bit. So today, because our normal mulch that we use is quite damp and wet, we're going to use some cardboard. So we've just rolled up some cardboard, make sure it doesn't have any print on it and no tape on it. You don't want to accidentally be burning any plastic smells. Next, you're opening your smoker. If you've used your smoker a lot, you might want to clean this area out here, which is can get gunked up with tar like that, but it's okay, there's enough holes there for the smoke to go through. Now, you don't need a blowtorch, you can just use a lighter, but in this case it'll make things a little bit quicker. Now be careful when you're doing this, wear your gloves, because as you can see there's heat coming out the other end here. But I'm just going to set fire to that and put it into the smoker and then start puffing the bellows. The reason why I'm putting a little bit of attention into really setting fire to it is I don't want it to go out straight away. Okay, so that hopefully will continue to go and give us some reliable smoke. So you can see we're puffing the bellows. What we're trying to do is keep that smoke going. If I put that down there and puff it for a while, then the smoke should continue to go. And what you want is nice, cool, thick smoke. You can smoke your hands if you are going gloveless, and that'll help mask your mammal smell. So there we have cardboard as a smoker fuel. I usually use something more organic like leaves that are on the ground or pine needles or bark from a tree. But cardboard is the next best thing if you don't have dry leaves or bark. Now bear in mind that this is not hot now, but it will get hot, so wear your gloves when you use that. So keep puffing till it's really going, and then you can blow 3 good puffs of smoke right into the entrance. So just 1, 2, 3, and then leave the smoker out the front like this. And that way the waft of smoke for any returning foragers, which we can't see at the moment, will they'll get the idea to change modes into a less attacking mode, if you like. Next the gable comes off. If you've got questions, put it in the comments below and we'll get to answering those. And then, while I could take this top off here, why don't we? Let's just have a little look. So we're prying it off with the chisel end of the tool. That's coming off easily. And oh wow, we have some bees up the top. That's great to see. But why don't we have a look at one of these frames to get an idea to see if they actually have started to store any honey in the center. To lift out a flow frame, there's 3 lift points. There's one under here, so use your chisel end and you can lift like that. There's one here, and there's, like standard frames, the J goes under and you're lifting like that. So having a look here, do we have any honey stores? The answer is no, but it's good to see them working on it. You can see they've waxed up all the cells and joined all the parts together, the flow frames. What you're also seeing is a bunch of beetles that they've been corralling into the cells. See those hive beetles? So that's a good reason to activate the pest trap below. These are a little beetle that don't bother a strong hive, but they can bother a weak hive. If the bees can't chase them around and corral them into the corners, they could lay thousands of eggs and it turns into a beetle nest instead of a beehive. It gets called a slime out, goes all slimy with the beetles. Maggots worming their way through the combs, not fun, but catching some of those beetles when the hive's weak is a good idea. Any questions coming in?
Yes, Seeds. Just wondering on Instagram asking what's the best way to get the bees into the flow hive box?
Okay, so if your hive's like this and it's a little bit weak, then the best thing to do, aside from, the best recipe to get your bees working the flow frames is a strong colony. When you open the windows, you're seeing lots of bees in here, so if you've got any extra boxes, take them off, put it back into this configuration. You want to see lots of bees in here, and that coinciding with a lot of flowers producing nectar, and then you get honey stores on the flow frames. If either of those things is out, then you won't see stores very quickly. Now, this is our winter time. The start of winter usually doesn't have that much nectar around, so not expecting to get stores at this time. So the answer for me here with this hive is probably patience, although we're going to have a look downstairs here and see what's going on in the brood box and make sure it's happy and healthy down the bottom. So one tip, take off any other boxes, reduce the size of your hive. Another thing you can do, and why don't we show you how to do that while we're here, is scrape some comb off the top of the brood frames. If they are ready for the super, they would have started to build comb on top of the brood frames. You can scrape some of that off and just mash it into the flow frame surface. And you can put that on the brood window and you can watch them actually recycle that. Now, that'll get them going on that little area on the flow frames, but it won't necessarily give you honey stores until you've got lots of bees and a good nectar flow. So the main thing is patience, but checking there's no issues with your hive is a good idea as well. So let's go ahead and take this box off by using the chisel end, and we're going to go around to each corner. Now, you can choose above the excluder or below the excluder, it doesn't really matter. You sort of get the feel for which one it wants to stick to. Let's go below, like that. And this has come off quite easily because the bees haven't stuck it down very well yet. It's also lightweight because there's not a whole lot of honey stores in there. And I can go ahead and just put that up on its end like this. The reason why I'm putting it on its end is I don't want to squash any of these bees here by putting it straight down on a flat surface. And if you keep the rotation of the frame in the same plane, then nectar isn't going to fall out of the cells. If there was nectar in the cells and I put it on its side, then you might get a whole lot of the hard-earned nectar that the bees have put in the cells dribbling everywhere. But if you stay in that same plane of the frames like that, then that's something you can do quite easily. Now that cardboard is really working well. Look at it powering away. It's working wonders considering we don't have any dry leaves. Next, you're just slowly peeling this excluder off. Now the queen could be on the underside of this, so we better have a quick look, quick check here. I can't see her anywhere there, but just to be sure, it's good practice to lean that up against the hive so that if you missed her and she was there, she could then walk back in. Next, what I'm going to do is grab the shelf brackets that we use for harvesting, and they double as a nice frame rest. So we're going over like this and down. If you've got questions, put it in the comments and we'll answer them as we go. That way we can take out a frame and rest it there to give us space to work, and if the queen happened to be on that frame and we didn't notice, she could then walk back in as well. Rather than putting it over leaning against the tree, it's good to keep it against the hive. So next I'm having a look here, wondering which frame is the easiest to pull out first. The reason why I'm doing that is the first frame is the hardest. When you lift it up vertically, then you potentially got comb that's connected perhaps, and it's dragging through the adjacent comb and so on. So you want one that's easy to get out, and that will provide space for you then to move sideways, and all the rest of them are much easier. So I'm looking around for one that doesn't have the burr comb going across. I can see this frame here doesn't have it. So I'm going to start right here by adding a tiny bit of smoke. I'm going to go sideways a little bit first, because that will break the propolis between the end bars, just like this with the hive tool. So that's just broken that propolis that they've put there. Same here on the other side, and we can do the same thing there and there. Now we're free to slowly, gently pull this frame up, loosening up the propolis that's sticking everything together. And I'm just going to go gently, slowly with that first frame. That'll give the bees time to move out of the way if there's comb parts that have a tight tolerance between them. There we go. If you go quickly, you might roll bees, which is not fun. They will not like being rolled along. They can get damaged. So wow, straight away I'm seeing a truckload of brood. Look at that, like clockwork across here. There's nothing wrong with this hive. They are looking in top shape with a whole lot of baby bees that'll be emerging into the hive as soon as they've chewed their way out of all of these cocoons. Look at that. Beautiful. And the other side is similar, with brood running all the way across like that. So straight away you can see that this is worker brood because it's capped flush with the comb, but it's less translucent than the honey is. So these are all baby bees waiting to emerge out of their cells, and they'll all come out in the next 11 days. So that's fantastic. So already convinced that the only thing we need for this hive to get honey stores is patience. Any more questions, Trace?
Yeah, some great questions coming in, which is always great for beginner beekeeping. And Sean's asking is, he was told by like traditional beekeepers that to store the super in the wintertime, put it in the freezer for a couple of days, then keep it in an airtight bag or container. He's just wondering, is that the similar thing to do with the Flow Hive super? And what if there's already uncapped honey in it? Does that matter?
Okay, if you do want to store frames of honey, whether it be flow frames or any others, as you say, then a freezer is a great way to do it, because that will limit any issues of fermentation or anything like that that might occur if you just put it in a tub. Especially if you're in a humid climate, you could get remaining nectar in your frame starting to ferment or even go mildewy. So the freezer is the very best way to keep it, and you can keep it there in the freezer for an indefinite amount of time, and when your bees are ready for it, you can put it back on again. If you're in a cold climate, you may not need a freezer. You may be able to just put it in a tub in outside your house, where it's going to stay nice and cold through that winter time. Here in the subtropics, we rarely do that. We just leave the supers on all year round. here's a baby bee just emerging out of its cell. Look at this. Just there at the tip of the hive tool. It's just chewing its way out. So they chew their way out of their cell and they arrive in what is a very busy environment with foot traffic running over their heads. Look at that. And it's trying to get itself out. Still got a little bit of chewing to do. And then it's going to emerge into the hive as a fluffy little baby bee ready to do its first chores. And one of its first chores is going to be cleaning the cells they come out of. And then they might move on to feeding the young larvae. They'll feed the young larvae royal jelly in the first 3 days of their life. Then most of them will be fed a bee bread on day 3. And through epigenetics, that will turn it from what would have been a queen into a worker bee as soon as they're fed plant proteins. Okay, is it going to come out for us? Looks like it's still got a little bit of chewing to do. This bee's servicing this cell over here. It's got its foot on the head of the baby. It's an interesting way to arrive in the world, is into a busy beehive. It's very cool to stare in at this world. You almost always see something interesting and something new. So it never gets boring, beekeeping. And many people find that this gets quite addictive, looking in and learning and watching your bees grow. So what we can do is put this frame on our frame rest, and that will give us some room. Now I'm going to put it on the high points. It usually works a bit better to put it on the high points than try to slot it down. So there it is there. And that gives us room for a couple more frames as well. Okay, great. Can add a little bit of smoke to the end bars. Hardly need it with this colony. It's doing well, but it's not overflowing with bees yet. But we expect it to be overflowing with bees in the next few weeks, judging by that brood pattern. Okay, next frame. So we're gently lifting that up. We could go sideways now, which makes it a lot easier. And what do we have here? This is interesting. This one has a lot of empty cells. Very different to the previous frame. It's possible that we cycled that in from the edge last time we were here. So I'm looking around just to see if I can spot the queen. One little tip is, as you pull this frame out, take a look at the frame next to it. And you'll often see her there on the next frame as you pull this one out. Perhaps she just scampered off this one, and you can get a little cross-section view of the frame below. The light's a bit low today, so it's a little bit harder to see. Now, if I wanted to get the bees off this to have a really good look at it, then I would just give it a quick, sharp shake right over the top of the hive, so that if the queen is on here, she'll fall straight into the box below. So the main thing we're looking for here, aside from just curiosity, is making sure we have a functioning queen, laying more eggs, and healthy brood in the hive. And we already have seen that. We've seen a lot of brood on this frame just here. So we're happy that this hive has a laying queen, although we have not seen her. And you don't really need to find her, but it's fun to. There is a few reasons why you might need to find her, but we don't need to find her today. Any more questions?
Yeah, Chris is wondering, Cedar, if you've got 2 brood boxes and you want to inspect the bottom box, is it okay to rest that brood box the way you've just rested that super, like on its end like that?
Yes, absolutely. You can rest it on its end. I recommend on the end because there's no bees there to squash as you upend the box and put it down onto the flat surface or the ground. So what's going on this frame? Now, why is this frame got hardly any brood when the one next to it had a lot of brood? And it could just be timing, because if you look at this frame here, all of those brood are going to emerge in the next 11 days, and you'll probably see a frame looking empty like this. So the queen has been working like clockwork, one frame to the next. But what I want to see, and I might need to get in some better light here, is whether there are any eggs down the cells. So to do that, you might need your glasses if you do wear glasses, and you also need good light shining down the cells to see if you can see any eggs. Look at this, there's two baby bees emerging there. It's very cool. And the other side looks similar. Look at this bee, it's just emerged from its cell, it's staggering along, hasn't learnt to walk properly yet, and it's a bit smaller and it's a bit kind of fluffy over the top of its thorax and a bit first steps in the hive. Now, it's hard to even get enough light today down the cells to have a look. I'm not seeing actual, oh there we go. Here we go, there's very young larvae in this section. I doubt you'll see it on camera, but there's a whole lot of little crescent moons and a little bit of royal jelly down the cells, consuming the first thing that larvae will consume, the mother's milk, the royal jelly, which is excreted by the bees and fed to the very young larvae. Another baby bee. Very cool. So another good sign, we're seeing very young larvae. So it means the queen has been laying in the last 3 days or so. So we know that we have a queen in here somewhere.
So that might help with Spryden's question, is like it opened up their brood box the other day and there's very little brood and no honey in the box. So just wondering what they should do.
Very little brood and no honey. So
yeah.
First of all, you'll need to have a look at what type of brood it is. Make sure that it is worker brood that you are seeing, not drone brood. If they're sticking out like a little bullet shape, and I'll try and find an example for you, it could be drones, which could mean you don't have a queen at all, and the workers are starting to lay, and if the workers lay, they're unfertilised eggs that can only be the male bees or the drones. So have a look at what brood it is, and make sure that it is worker brood. And if it is worker brood, then it's likely that you do have a queen in there, and she's either not resourced to lay enough, there's not enough nectar around, not enough honey, or she's failing as a queen and perhaps she's in the last years of her life and she's not able to lay enough eggs to really build up the colony. So what's happening in other hives around you will also help you understand what's going on in your hive. If other hives are thriving, they're really bringing in a lot of nectar, then I would say you have a failing queen and it's time to requeen. If other hives are consuming their honey, there's not a lot of nectar around for them to bring in, then you might want to consider feeding that hive to get them through what is a hard patch where they're starting to starve. And you could make a quick feeder on top of the inner cover by putting some sugar syrup in a Ziploc bag, put some pinholes in it, take out the plug in the inner cover, the bees can get up there and at least consume something to keep them alive. Another thing you might consider is dry sugar feeding, where you can just pour some dry white castor sugar into the open cells if they're empty. Don't want to do it in cells that have eggs down the bottom, but choose some edge frames. If there's no honey stores in them, they'll just be open, empty cells, and you can pour some sugar in there. At least the bees have something to chew on while they get back on their feet. Even though sugar is not the best thing for bees, you're far better off feeding them sugar than letting them starve to death. Okay, next let's pull out another frame and have a look. So we've got brood, bee bread and honey on this frame. It's a bit heavier, showing that we've got some honey stores. We've got a lot of brood as well. Let's just have a quick look for the queen in case she is here before we shake all of these bees in to the hive. Any more questions coming through?
Yeah, so it's, in relation to the flow hive, like since you don't really disrupt the bees much before you take the honey out, does it confuse the bees to, you know, because they're not really sure, all of a sudden 1 minute their honey's there and the next minute it's all gone?
We might have to pay for their therapy bills, perhaps. I think that bees are so clever, they know when it's disappeared. If you think about what happens in nature sometimes, let's say a tree moves in the wind, let's say a log falls, let's say comb cracks and honey spills out, the bees know when it's time to repair that comb. And we went through a lot of testing and measuring and trying things over a decade, inventing the flow hive. And what we found was the bees were clever enough to realise the honey's drained out from beneath their feet. For a long time I had complicated mechanisms with diaphragms in the hive that would pull a capping section away, thinking, because conventional beekeeping you're always cutting off the capping, that we'd need to remove the capping to get the honey to flow inside the hive. We had a win where we didn't need to remove the capping, and then we had another win where the bees are so clever they would realise that the honey's drained out from beneath their feet. It must be like walking on an empty drum skin rather than one that's stuffed full of honey. And the sound must be quite different. So straight away they can tell that the honey's drained out, and they will start chewing away really quite quickly, uncapping and repurposing that wax around that area, rebuilding the cells, and away they go again. So you can harvest honey out of your hive and watch the bees just going about their business, and it is really a lot less disturbance for the bees harvesting in that way. So I would say if you had to pay for bee therapy, you're much more likely to get away with less of a bill with the flow frames on top and harvesting in this new way that my father and I invented. Okay. What I'm going to do is actually top up this smoker because my cardboard is actually running thin. So to do that, I do have some pine needles that I'm going to throw in there.
A couple of people were asking, do they miss the start about what you'd used in that smoker, but is that cardboard all gone now?
It is. That was cardboard in there, and we actually would need to repack it. I was hoping we'd get a bit longer out of cardboard, but it seems to burn just as fast as if you've got mulch in there. And we're down to some dregs here, but let's see. We'll stuff a pine cone and some pine needles in here, keeping in mind it's hot. Be careful, don't burn yourself. And then we'll get some nice fuel going again.
Seeds, that's a good question. Do you ever leave that hole open in the inner cover so that the bees can access the roof?
We do sometimes, yes. We will leave that out if we're happy for the bees to build comb in the roof, or perhaps we want them to build comb in the roof because we're wanting to collect some honeycomb. Or perhaps we've got a feeder and it's sitting up here on the inner cover, and that way you can actually use that area as a feeder by taking out that little plug. In the beginning we didn't have that plug in there, and the bees would get up there and create a lot of natural comb, which was fun for a while but a bit of a mess to clean up. So with our Flow Hive 2 we decided to supply that plug that goes in the hole.
Right.
Okay, we'll put a little more fuel in that smoker, and hopefully that will keep us going for a while.
That might help Hudson. Hudson's wondering, Cedar, if you do smoke the bees, do you really need to wear a bee suit?
Some beekeepers don't use a bee suit, but it's a good idea to wear one because they could be aggressive, and they often are aggressive. Those beekeepers that don't wear a bee suit when they're doing their brood inspections usually have quite a high tolerance for stings. I don't like stings, especially on my face. If the hive was showing signs of aggression, I would put my gloves on. I'd rather not get stings. So it's a great idea to wear your protection, especially if you're new to beekeeping. If your smoker's been sitting there and all but gone out, you will need to puff it for a while to get it going again. Any more questions coming in?
Yes, it's a good one. Their bees are more visible on the left-hand side of their flow hive, and it is the side that gets more sun. Do you think that's why they hang out more on that side of the hive?
Yes, it is said that another tip for looking for the queen is to go to the warmer side of your hive. So the bees do tend, in the colder times, to be on the warmer side of the hive, as you say.
So Georgie's asking, Seeds, and must have missed the start of this, wondering could you add the super now to the brood box if it looks like this? So Georgie probably missed the start of where you actually took the super off, because there's a few people asking, so how do you know when to add that super?
So the time to add the super is when the bees are looking busy in the hive like this, and they are using all of the combs. They've drawn out the wax in all of these frames. Now, so if your brood box looks like this, go ahead and add the super, with one caveat. If you've got a long time without flowers, or a long cold winter ahead in your area, then don't add the super. Let them have a smaller area to look after during that cold time, and add it when the weather warms up and there's flowers and resources of pollen for the bees to bring in. Today this hive hasn't been storing any honey in the super, even though they look okay down here, and that's a symptom of what's going on in the environment around here. We're in our early part of our winter and there's not a whole lot of flowers at the moment. We're expecting some to come in the next 4 weeks, so we'll go ahead and put the super back on.
Nice. We've got someone, and they've had about 8,000 bees fly away from their 6-month-old hive, and they reckon there's still about 12,000 in there. Just checking that you think everything is going okay.
8,000 bees fly away?
That's what they've said, yeah. I don't know, maybe they've...
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they reckon there's still about 12 left in there.
To have the stats on it. Now, if you've got reducing numbers like that, and bear in mind that a functioning colony might have 20,000 or 30,000 or 40,000 bees in the hive, so the numbers sound like they're low in your hive. So what you'll need to do is nurture your hive through what is at probably a time where there's less resources available. If you find that hives nearby are bringing in a lot of nectar and a lot of pollen, and your hive isn't, and the numbers are declining, then it's probably a sign something's wrong. You need to get in there, do a brood inspection, and potentially take the old queen away and buy in a new queen. When I say buy in, you don't have to buy it in. You could just put a frame from another hive in here, or you could just have a look down the cells, check there's bee eggs, and let them raise another queen. However, if you buy in genetics from a queen breeder, you'll often be more guaranteed to get some nice, calm, productive bees, and they'll come in a little queen cage like this with about 5 escort bees inside it. And what you'll do after about 24 hours of the old queen not being present, the bees will realise that there's no queen, and they'll more willingly accept the new one. And what you'll be doing is just putting it into the brood nest like this, by making just enough space between a couple of frames to put this queen cage down on this angle like that. And the reason why I've got this facing up is that if any escort bees in here, I said they come with about 5 escort bees to feed the queen while she's in transit, and because she can't feed herself. And then what will happen is, if any of the escort bees die in here, you don't want them blocking the entrance, so the queen might not be able to get out. So positioning it like this between the frames is good, and the bees will chew away at the candy, which is stopping her getting out while she's in transit, and she'll be released into the hive a day or two later. By that time, your hive will have gotten used to the pheromones of the new queen, and you'll have a higher acceptance rate. So you might need to requeen, is the short answer.
Nice. Truly Blessed is saying, that view has to be in New Zealand. Where are you?
Well, Trace is from New Zealand.
Maybe that's why they think we're in New Zealand.
It certainly is a beautiful place, and it's a beautiful place here on the east coast of Australia as well. And we're on the balcony today. Beekeeping is a wonderful thing you can do in a very small amount of space, especially with the flow hive, because all of the extraction equipment is contained within the hive. You no longer need to dedicate a room in your house or a garage or a laundry to the honey extracting spinner, the decapping line, the benches, the tubs and buckets and sieves and all of that stuff you once had. That's all here in the hive, taking up about this much space. So you can keep bees on a balcony, you can keep them on a rooftop, you can keep flow hives in a small amount of space and also get real produce. Another great thing is, if you are on a balcony, let's say in close proximity to others, you don't have to pull your hive apart as much because you're not going through that process of pulling it apart and brushing all the bees off every frame and taking those frames to a processing shed and all of that. The extraction is done in the hive, so you get less times of bees going everywhere like you might do if you're doing your brood inspections. And it's become a wonderful thing for city folk who don't really have land to do farming, to be able to get real produce from a very small footprint, even a balcony, and to be able to share that produce with their friends and family and experience that joy that humans yearn for, of farming, of producing their own food, and being able to bring that story to the table. We're going to pull out another frame here as you think of more questions. Beginner beekeeping questions today. Don't be afraid to ask. We've got a friendly environment here with people that understand that we all started as new beekeepers once, and we all had silly questions in the beginning. So go ahead and ask away. Now this frame is heavier. I'm feeling a bit of weight in it, and that usually means there's quite a lot of honey stores in the frame, and that's a good thing to look out for as well, because honey stores are what the bees need to be able to feed. Now I'm hearing a little piping noise, which might mean we have a queen on this frame. Don't know if you can hear that. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear that. Oh, she stopped. Is that a queen tooting, as they say? The queen's toot or pipe has a bit of a war cry, or it's one of the reasons they do, in order for any other queens in queen cells, before they've even emerged, will actually make a sound back again to the queen. The reigning queen will rush over, sting them through their cocoon before they've even emerged, to make sure there's not a rival queen to her throne. You seeing a queen on that side, Callum?
Oh, look, someone said they heard it, Seeds. Heard the toot toot.
I'm not seeing the queen though, so that is confusing. Let's have a look. Have a good look on the frame here. Let's just put it down momentarily. Ah, I'm hearing another pipe from inside the hive. This is fascinating and something I haven't heard the call and response. Sounds like it's coming from this area here. So there's more mysteries of bees to uncover, and the more you realise, the more you learn, the more you realise there is to learn. So it's a fascinating journey of learning all the way, whether you're beginning in beekeeping or whether you're a seasoned beekeeper. There's always more things to find, more things to notice. So what is going on here with a call and response of tooting is something new. Is it a queen or is it not?
Is it only the queen that does the piping, Seeds?
Well, chime in and let us know. Is it only the queen that does the piping or tooting sound? Could be others. Amazing. Any more questions coming in?
Yeah, Natalie's wondering, you might be able to show on this frame, just wondering, a new beginner beekeeper, how can you tell the difference between worker and worker brood?
Worker brood and drone brood?
And drone brood, sorry, yeah.
Okay, we'll see if we can find an example for you where I'm only seeing worker brood at the moment, but as spring comes on we'll see a lot of drones. I'm still a bit interested in what's going on here. Whether we do have perhaps a young queen here somewhere. Any more questions coming in?
Yeah, here's a good one. This they found their super is full of honey, but the bees haven't kept it, and the front window is also not filled up. Just wondering what's going on, and they're feeling a little bit puzzled, and it's been like that for quite a while.
Ah, so it's possible they're just waiting for a bit more nectar to finish off the cells. If you get a good nectar flow, they'll put a bit more honey in and they'll cap it off. Or they might get a bit impatient and cap it off, even sunken in a bit, so the capping's below the surface of the flow frames. Sometimes they'll do that, other times they're just waiting for a bit more nectar to finish off those cells.
Seeds, how often can you go into the brood box, or how often should you do brood inspections?
Okay, that's a great question. The answer usually comes from your local beekeepers, as the requirements will differ depending on where you are in the world. Some areas are more demanding than others. Australia has had the golden era for a very long time now, where we haven't had Varroa in the country. Now we do, the requirements are going to increase as to how often we have to get in there depending on our management practices with the Varroa. So chime in and let us know how often you should do your brood inspections in your area. For quite a while now, we have had to go and do a Varroa inspection with an alcohol wash once in every 16-week period. So that'd be the minimum requirement here. So they're not as demanding as things like chickens, where you might have to close up the pen every night, or other animals. The farming, you can go away for months at a time, and your bees are usually fine. However, there are times when you do need to get in there and do your brood inspections and check your colony is happy and healthy, like we're doing here today. Or you just might be curious. I'd really welcome you to get in there and do them more often than you might need to, just to learn about your bees, and you'll find it's quite interesting and gets quite addictive after a while, looking and watching and learning as your bees progress.
See, Leanne's wondering, do you have to paint your flow hive before you use it?
So if you've got the Western Red Cedar wood, you may decide just to not paint it at all, leave it perfectly natural. However, I would recommend painting at least the roof. So reason being is this is the area that gets the harsh weather. So if you're going to leave the hive natural, at least paint your shingles, your ridge cap, and paint them both sides like that. And that'll give you the best, longest lasting weather protection on top. You may decide to paint the inner cover as well, because that can get moisture on it and suffer from cracking at the corners or expansion at the corners. And the rest of the hive, if you've got the cedar wood, you could leave just to go grey, and you may get decades out of your cedar box with no paint finish on it at all. It is an extraordinary wood. It's very popular in North America, and that's why we offer this Western Red Cedar wood. If you've got our Araucaria, like pretty much any other wood used in beehives, you will need to paint it with a good external house paint, which ideally you do before you've put your bees in. You can touch up paint with the bees in there, which I have done. You can get there in your bee suit. Early morning's good for that while there's not a whole lot of bees flying, and you can give your box a little bit of TLC and touch up the paintwork and so on while the bees are in it. But generally we do paint the hive prior to putting the bees in it and let it dry for a couple of days so it doesn't have strong vapours. Okay. Fascinating. We did not find the queen, but we heard a lot of tooting, which is interesting. We're going to pull out another frame here, making sure our smoker hasn't gone out. I'll use the smoke just to clear bees away. And we can pull out another frame and have a look what's going on it. I'll see if I can find an example for you of drone brood and worker brood. So what have we here? We have more brood, which is great. Got a lot of brood in this hive, a lot of bees. This hive is happy and healthy. It's just waiting for a good nectar flow to really bring in enough stores to store in the honey super so we can share some too. Having a quick look. Queen's a bit cheeky today, she's not jumping out. Sometimes you find her quickly, sometimes you don't find her at all. I'm busy yabbering away, so I'm not particularly concentrating on the task. Any more questions?
So it's Gregory's wondering, he'd heard someone said about hive beetle using a product called Grub X on the grass around the hive to prevent the grubs from growing into hive beetles. Just wondering if you've heard of it or would you recommend it?
Oh, that's a new one, Grub X.
Grub X.
Chime in if you've heard or used of Grub X and what your experience is. Okay. That's cool. I love it how we learn new things all the time from a global beekeeping community. It's such a cool thing. I've learned so much from all of you out there. Okay. So I'm not seeing an example of drone brood. Now if you want to get bees off a frame, you need to give it a good shake like this, right over the box, put it on a diagonal, make sure that the bees are going down into the box if you can, like this. And then you can get a better look at the frame. You could use a bee brush to brush off the last ones, but in this case I'm satisfied I can see well enough with what's going on this frame. Give us a thumbs up if you can see the grubs down these cells. That's the larvae, perhaps on day 6 or so. I spent about 11 days as a grub and about another 10 or 11 days in the cocoon phase there, where they're going through their metamorphosis, growing their wings and their eyes and legs and everything, just like a caterpillar as it turns into a butterfly. We've got honey stores here, we've got nectar there glistening, and here's a nice show and tell of the difference between honey and brood. So honey is a bit more translucent in the cappings, can be brown like that, or it can be light yellow depending on how much foot traffic has been over the top of the comb. And the brood is always less translucent like that. Same on the other side, we've got a nice amount of brood and grubs, looking good. Say grubs, larvae is probably a nicer word.
So Brody's wondering, can you use pure cane juice instead of processed sugar crystals as a temporary feeding solution to assist a struggling hive?
No, always used highly processed sugar. If you feed them even raw sugar, it contains things that bees should not consume. So use processed white sugar when making up a syrup for feeding to the bees. It's a bit counterintuitive like that,
Yeah.
but no, that's what you should do. Here's the edge frame all the way over on the side of the hive. Typically you'll get more honey stores here, but we have some drones, which is what I was trying to find for you. And a quick look in case we have a queen. I can't see a queen. So I've got the example, going back to an earlier question, of what drone brood looks like compared to worker brood. I'll shake these bees off the frame so you can have a really good look. Again, shaking the bees diagonally like this. And now you can clearly see the difference here between worker brood and drone brood. I will just lean this up and rearrange these frames so you can get a really good look at the difference on this frame down here compared to the other one. What I might do is just pick up this one behind because it had a nice amount of brood on it. Look at that, beautiful. Shake the bees off that for you. And now we've got a really nice example of worker brood and drone brood you see the worker brood is flush with the cells. See how it almost looks like honeycomb, but you can tell that this is honey because the capping's more translucent and this isn't, because the bees have spun a silk cocoon around themselves, and that's what makes the difference in look. So they're all worker bees. Now we come across to this frame here, and what we have is very large size cells with drones. So these are the male bees. They're bigger, they need a bigger cell. So they stick out from the comb. Another thing you'll notice is the cell size on this comb. The bees have purposefully sized these cells bigger for better honey storage, and they can use them for drones. So see the cell size difference between here and here. Here we're looking at perhaps a 5.3 millimeter cell. Here we're looking at a 6.5 millimeter cell, right in the drone range. For the flow frames, we went for a 6 millimeter size cell, about this size, because when bees are storing honey away from the brood nest, they tend to go for larger cells for more efficient storage and deeper cells, and that's why we chose the close to 6 millimeter size cell of the flow frames. And it also limits the chance of the queen laying in the flow frames, where it's a little bit squeezy for drones and it's a bit big for workers. However, if a queen does get stuck above the excluder, she might still lay in the flow frames, or perhaps some queens will and some won't. Some people don't use excluders with the flow hive, but we still recommend them because some queens will lay eggs in flow frames. It's a great example.
Yeah. Are they also different colours seeds, and if so, why? Or is it just the way it's looking at the moment?
So they typically can be browner or they can be yellower, and it really depends how much they're recycling our wax and how much propolis content is in the wax they're using. So these are simply, they could be brown like that, or they could be more yellow, depending on the what the bees used to help cover the wax over on the final sealing of the capping. Here you've got beautiful nectar. Bees are putting their capping on when they've got the moisture content down low. You've got really beautiful honeycomb here. Isn't it just amazing to look at? Makes your mouth water. You could cut out a little bit of this. The bees wouldn't miss it. They would fill it back in really quite quickly. So if you do want some honeycomb, you can get some from the edges. In the brood nest, often there's no brood in the edge frames. Beautiful. We've got time for a couple more questions.
Great. Abby's wondering, Cedar lives in a cold climate in New South Wales and has left the super on for winter and is going to leave 3 frames of uncapped honey just for the bees to get through winter. Just wondering if you think that's okay for a winter in a cold climate to just leave 3 frames of uncapped honey.
So it really depends how long the bees will need to survive without flowers. If it's a couple of months, no problem. If it's going to be 6 months, then you probably need more stores. So ask your local beekeepers in your area how much stores you might need. You could also decide to feed them and see if you can build up a few more stores for the bees prior to them going into that long cold winter. I just got a bee in my veil. I obviously didn't do my zips up here. Let me get that out. There we go.
You didn't listen to yourself, Seth?
No. Let me do a better job of zipping up. There we go. This one goes that way. The other one goes over the top. And then the Velcro down here. There we go.
Hey, this is a good one. How many, Hub Scooter's asking, how many times a year does the queen mate?
So a virgin queen emerges into the hive, and she will wait for the next nice sunny day to do her mating flight. And she might just go on a single mating flight, or she might go on several. But it'll happen usually in the first week of her life as a queen in the hive. She will be taking off and going on a couple of mating flights. She will return with enough sperm to last 6 years of laying, and she won't leave the hive again unless the hive swarms. So it's amazing, really. She only really needs to mate in that first week, and then that's it. We're going to slowly put this hive back together now and thank them for being patient with us here as we've really pulled apart their brood nest and stared in at this superorganism. They almost act as a single entity that spreads itself out over up to a 6 mile or 10 kilometre radius and pulls itself back in to being a singular organism again.
So does it matter? Kate's wondering if it matters if you put those frames back in the wrong order or in a different order.
So there are reasons why you'll mix the order of frames around. Perhaps you're cycling an old frame from the centre out towards the edge. Generally we try to put it back in the same order, or if we can't put them back in the same order, we just make sure we're not squashing comb against comb. If you squash comb against comb and you've got lots of hive beetles in your area like we do, then you might find issues where the hive beetles really can make use of that area where the bees can't chase them around, and you can get an issue where that causes what's called a slime out, where lots of hive beetle larvae are worming their way through the brood, damaging the brood, through the honey, spoiling the honey. So for that reason we want to make sure we've got space down between the frames for the bees to get through. You want at least a 5mm gap between comb surfaces so the bees can get in there and work those areas. Okay, so I will try and remember which way they go back, but I won't necessarily be able to do that. Now this was the edge one. It had the example of the drones on it, and the drones were facing in towards the brood nest, and there actually is a couple of drones on this side as well, showing that they're happy and healthy. They're putting brood all the way out to the edge of the hive, which is great. So dropping that back in on the edge is a good start. Now leaving the burr comb, some people chop it all off, but it can be a useful way to tell, because I can see that this burr comb matches with this piece here. So I know I put those frames back in the order they came out. Using your smoker, clear the bees away. What you're going to need to do is bunch the frames up together. You don't want to squash the bees between the end bars. Out of the way. There we go. And that'll make space for us to put the rest of the frames back in.
So any thoughts on spraying fruit flowers with honey water to increase pollination?
Oh, I'd never thought of spraying. You certainly wouldn't spray honey water because that might spread pathogens from one hive to the next, but you could experiment with spraying sugar water if you had a specific flower that you wanted some more pollination with. I've never heard of that, but if you have, chime in and let us know. Could be a creative way to get more pollination going on a particular crop that really is suffering from not enough pollination.
Here's a good one, Seeds. Is it complicated or difficult to relocate a hive? And is there a time of season that would be better to do that?
So you can move a hive any time of year. But it is a bit complicated, and there's a little bit of learning to do, like most things in beekeeping. So what you'll need to consider is the way that bees can almost GPS locate to this specific spot. So much so that if you move the hive 3 meters that way, all the bees will come back and ball up here on the railing and go, where's my hive? And that's pretty amazing that they are so accurate to where they live. So because of that, we have to be careful when we move a hive not to orphan a lot of the foragers from the hive. So the conventional way to move a hive is actually to seal them up in the early morning, making sure they're well ventilated, take them away more than, say, 6 kilometers or 4 miles away, leave them there for a few months till all the forager bees have forgotten or changed over and forgotten the landmarks of the previous position, and then bring them back to the new location. But that's quite a lot of work. You're packing up your hive, you're moving it twice, and there is a way you can get the bees to reorientate to the new location. So the simple hack that I use if I want to move the hive a short distance is I'll just move it, say in the early morning, maybe if it's say 100 meters away, I'll cross the other side of a yard, and then I'll put a whole lot of foliage at the entrance. Or you can get an old t-shirt and tape it around the hive, making sure there's still room for the bees to get out. But what will happen is the enthusiastic bees will run out to do their pollination and they'll crash into this obstacle and they'll go, what's changed, what's moved? Almost as if a tree has fallen in the forest. And that will cause a lot of those foraging bees to go on a new reorientation flight. And you'll get 95% of your foragers going to the new location across the other side of your yard. You still get 5% back at the old spot. You can either choose to let them work it out, or if there's other hives nearby, they'll eventually decide to go into those hives. Or you can put an empty box there, even if it's an old cardboard box, collect up any returning foragers to the old spot and ferry them to the new spot and manually move them a few times and collect that last 5% of foragers. I find that reorientation technique a lot easier than doing 2 beehive moves, and it works well for me.
Fantastic. Seeds, if your bees are getting aggressive, how would you go about sort of reducing that?
So the number one reason why bees will get aggressive is genetics. So let's say the bees have changed their queen, which they will do. If you've got a failing queen, they will bump her off, raise a new one. That new queen might mate with some aggressive rascals from down the road. And when she goes to the drone congregation area, there might be bees there from 100 different hives in the local area. So those drones will be carrying the genetics of perhaps wild hives in the trees and so on. And those genetics will come back into your hive, which might carry aggressive genetics. Now, to change it over, what you'll need to do is get in there, find the queen, take her away, wait 24 hours and put in a new queen, preferably buy it in from a queen breeder. You can buy it in the mail in most continents, and you've got a queen in there with some escort bees, and you'll be putting that in between the frames like this. A couple of days later, the candy block will be chewed out, the queen will emerge into the hive, and a month or so later, all of the guard bees will have changed over and the temperament should be nice and gentle. So that's what you'll need to do if you find the bees are aggressive. It's not fun to be around, they're bothering people nearby and so on. Some people choose to leave the aggressive traits, thinking that perhaps their bees are thriving and they don't want to disturb that, and they'll just protect themselves more, but they'll need a situation where those bees aren't bothering anybody else or any neighbours as well. So if you've got plenty of space, you might decide to leave those aggressive traits in your hive, but it's up to you whether you want to change the genetics of your hive by changing the queen. If you find that daunting to get in there and find the queen in an aggressive hive, then get help from an experienced beekeeper that can help you find that queen when the bees are in that aggressive mode. Use plenty of smoke to really calm them down, and that will increase the chances of finding the queen and being able to do that changeover.
Nice.
Okay.
So have you heard about Metal? Got a beekeeper here who got some honey from a beekeeper who had traditional hives, but the honey was all stored in the stainless steel extractor. But they'd read that the metal kills the enzymes in honey. So just wondering, does that mean that the honey is substandard honey?
You know, I grew up with honey being stored in tins, and I just thought that was the taste of honey, and I only found out later that metallic taste was actually coming from the tins or the drums that the honey was being stored in. And there's no way I'll store honey in metal. And if you're using a conventional extractor, even being in there for several hours will impart a flavour into the honey. So for that reason, I tend to keep honey away from metal. Even leaving honey on a teaspoon for 20 minutes, I can taste the difference in the honey, and it has that metallic taste because honey is acidic, it's reacting with the metal and imparting a flavour. So you're much better off with a glass jar or a plastic jar than you are putting honey in metal containers. Lots of beekeepers don't tend to notice the difference, but if you've got a fine palate and you're used to tasting honeys straight from the hive, whether it be comb or a flow hive, you will really quickly notice the difference and stop keeping your honey in metallic containers. Okay, now what did I do here? I started to put the hive back together. Now, does that bit go there? It looks like that one does go there, so that's good. Next we have another frame to go here, and I think it might be in between these two. So we're using the burr comb to tell which frames go together. I can see here that, does that go to there? Maybe not. Now I could have switched around a frame as well. Let's have a look. That does look like it could go there, and then the main thing to consider is whether you're pressing comb against comb. Yeah, that goes together. You can see that burr comb there, and then the last frame will go in between. We'll thank the bees for letting us look in at their world and put this hive back together. Bit of smoke will clear bees out of the way, even though it is agitating at first. Okay. Now which way around does this go? Let's have a look. Like that. So don't worry too much if you can't work out the order they go in. Just make sure we're not pressing comb against comb and allowing beetles to take over the show. I need a little bit more space here to drop this frame in and have a look, just by pulling these frames across in both directions. The last frame, or the first frame, is always the trickiest to get back into position. Use plenty of smoke to get the bees out of the way. There's a lot of bees in the way here. Even though it's obviously not great to have smoke in your face, it's better than being squashed between the end bars of the frames. Any last questions?
Yeah, so if you're, I've got some beekeepers experiencing a pretty bit of a heat wave, temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
Yeah, do you recommend doing anything to vent the hive to keep it nice and cool?
Yes, if you're in a heat wave, take out your tray altogether, allow maximum ventilation. So we have 3 ventilation controls here. If the vents are up there like that, air can flow in through these vents and up between the tray and the screened bottom board. If you have it the other way up, it blocks ventilation. If you have it out altogether, then you have maximum ventilation with a whole open screen bottom board. That'll really assist your hive to keep it cool in a heat wave. Okay, I'm going to use the bee brush here just to brush in the remaining bees, like this. Get them back in the box. And on this side too. There we go. Then I'm going to use the smoker to just clear the bees away so we can pop our excluder back on. Notice the tune just changed. They're starting to give me little warning hits now. They will actually just crash into you first. They don't really want to sting usually unless you've got a really aggressive hive. But they are a bit sick of us staring in at their hive on this grey, old, rainy day. Not the best time to be beekeeping, as we said in the beginning. Aim for a nice warm sunny day when it's not too windy and you'll get calmer bees. Yeah. Look at that, the smoke's doing a great job of clearing away bees. And then we can take an opportune moment to put our excluder back in place, bearing in mind there's still a few bees on the rim here that we can just flick away. Or another way to do it is put it on a diagonal and then twist it into position, which will sweep some bees out of the way. Okay, so there we have it there. Excluder back in place, and before there's too many bees on top, we're going to throw on the super. Now we're choosing to put the super on because there will be a flow coming, but in a lot of cases, if you saw the bees weren't using it and you're in your winter time, you'd leave the super off, just to make it a bit easier for the bees to maintain their temperature over their winter. Next we're going to put on our inner cover, which is over here. And then the gabled roof on top. Making sure that little bee doesn't get stuck up in the roof cavity, so it might not make it out again. Another one. There we go. And don't forget to put your covers in place, which will help insulate in this cold time, or in the hot times, stop the sun shining in and really heating up your hive. We've got time for one more question as we close up this hive.
Yes, it's just someone asking, wondering what the temperature is here, because they'd heard that opening the brood box under 18 degrees will kill the larvae. Is this true?
Okay, we're probably about, I don't know, what are we today? Probably 21 degrees. We can't really complain about winter here, and it's not really a winter at all as far as Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, goes. They're used to very cold winters. So it's not particularly cold for the bees here, but yes, as you say, you want to be careful of cold times and exposing uncapped larvae. The capped larvae you can pull out of the hive in cold times and they'll be fine, but when they're uncapped as a grub, that's when they can suffer from cold shock. So generally avoid, when it's cold, pulling frames out of the hive, and if you have to, don't leave them out for very long. Okay, we've got our hive back together. And then we just need to put our key access cover back in place, and we can then, there we go, close up the hive. We can put our shelf brackets away, and all of these bees will find their way back into the hive. If we look at the entrance, you'll see some bees fanning their Nasanov gland. So have a look at the entrance here. Now you notice in the beginning there was no bees at the entrance because it's a cold day and we're in our winter and there wasn't a lot of activity going on. But now there is a lot. We've pulled apart the hive, there's a lot of bees that are outside the hive, If you have a close look, you'll see bees with their tails in the air fanning away and a little bit of a kink on the last part of their abdomen. And what they're doing is exposing their Nasonoff gland, which then fans a scent to say, this is home, this is home. So what they're doing is they're helping all of the other bees find their way back into the entrance. It's pretty cool. Thanks for watching. And if you've got something you'd like us to cover, or if you've got answers to other people's questions, chime in, let us know, and we're back again next week, same